The text arrived at 8:17 that morning. We're not coming. No explanation, no apology. Just those 4 words from my father, sitting on the screen while the apartment buzzed with people steaming dresses, arranging flowers, and pretending not to notice that I'd gone completely still. For a minute, I thought there had been an accident. I called. Straight to voicemail. I called my aunt, my cousin, my younger brother. Nothing. My fiancée found me standing by the kitchen window, phone in one hand, tie hanging loose around my neck. "You don't have to tell me," she said quietly. "Just tell me if we're still getting married." I looked at her and realized the question wasn't about logistics. It was about whether I was going to let someone else's decision become ours. We're getting married. The ceremony wasn't perfect. There were empty seats where my family should have been. Friends asked careful questions they already knew not to finish. My mother's favorite song played anyway because the musicians hadn't been told to change anything. By afternoon, I had accepted that maybe I'd never know why. Then my best man walked over holding his phone. I almost didn't show you. On the screen was my uncle's social media post. A bright blue sea. White buildings climbing a hillside. My father smiling beside my mother. My brother laughing with cousins. Everyone holding drinks on the deck of a rented boat in Santorini. The caption read, "Finally free of the drama." I stared at the photo longer than I should have. Not because they weren't at my wedding. Because they had planned this. Flights, hotels, reservations they hadn't chosen to miss one day. They had chosen me to miss. I handed the phone back. "What are you going to do?" my friend asked. I opened my messages, typed 2 words. Perfect timing. Then I put my phone away and returned to my reception. People expected anger. Instead, I danced with my wife. I thanked every guest. I cut the cake. I laughed more than I expected to. For the first time in years, I stopped trying to solve a problem that clearly didn't want to be solved. That evening, after everyone left, I opened my laptop. My family owned a successful logistics company. People assumed my father ran everything. Officially, he was the president. Operationally, I had spent nearly a decade building the systems that kept contracts moving, approvals flowing, vendors paid, and compliance current. Years earlier, when the business expanded too quickly, I had been added to the company's operating charter with authority over several administrative functions because I was the only one willing to manage them consistently. Nobody thought much about those documents anymore. They simply assumed I would always be there. I read every agreement twice, called the company's outside attorney, submitted my resignation from every operational role, requested removal from the business charter, transferred documentation exactly as required, revoked every authorization attached solely to my position, blocked corporate accounts from contacting my personal devices, no speeches, no announcements, just paperwork. For nearly a week nothing happened. Then the calls began. Not to me, to lawyers, to accountants, to compliance consultants. Approvals requiring my delegated authority couldn't simply be recreated overnight. Vendor certifications needed updated signatures. Governance documents required formal board action before responsibilities could legally shift. The company wasn't collapsing. It was simply discovering how much invisible work had been resting on someone they had stopped seeing. Professionals, not emotions, were now setting the timetable. 7 days after the wedding, someone pounded on my condo door hard enough to rattle the frame. I already knew who it was. My father looked older than I remembered. Not broken, just tired. "You couldn't answer one call?" he demanded. "I answered your text. You've created a disaster." I leaned against the doorway, coffee still warm in my hand. "No." He stared at me. "You did." He frowned. "You abandoned the business." I took a slow sip before answering. "You abandoned your son." Silence. People imagine moments like that ending with shouting. This one didn't. Finally he said, "Family doesn't do this." I almost laughed. Instead I said, "The morning of my wedding you told me you weren't coming. By afternoon I learned all of you were celebrating on a boat while calling me the drama." His shoulders dropped. I continued softly. "You said you were finally free of it. Another sip of coffee. I believed you. So I stopped being the person who kept cleaning it up. For the first time in my life, he had nothing ready to say, not because he agreed, because there wasn't an argument that changed facts already written into contracts, calendars, and memories. He looked past me into the condo. Photos from the wedding sat on a shelf behind the entryway. People who had chosen to be there. People who had stayed. "I didn't think you'd actually leave," he admitted. "I know. That was the problem." He nodded once, slowly, as if realizing the difference between dependence and appreciation years too late. "I should go." "I think so too." I closed the door gently, not to punish him, not to win. Just because some conversations end long before the people speaking realize they're over. The business eventually reorganized. My family adapted. Life continued. Sometimes people ask whether I regret removing myself. I tell them I regret something much older. I regret believing that being indispensable would eventually make me feel included. It never did. Walking away didn't erase the hurt. It simply made room for people who never needed a wedding invitation to prove they were already family.